way of openness. And first, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Patricia Bassin. I'm the Executive Director of the City of Los Angeles Human Relations Commission. And that mouthful can be condensed down to City HRC. I want to thank you all for taking time out this evening to come and join us tonight to see this wonderful film and to acknowledge the hard work that went into creating this. The individuals that you will see tonight spent not just what you saw today, but over 2 years of discussing and dialoguing about this very controversial issue. Our mandate at City HRC is not to agree or disagree with anyone's belief or opinion, but to defend the right to have an opinion and to respect the process and to engage in an active dialogue about those opinions. So tonight, that's what this really is about. How we can come down and talk civilly about controversial issues and still leave respecting the idea and the individual of each other. I'd like to introduce today Najuma, one of our senior policy advisors who worked tirelessly not just on putting the film together, but for the last 2.5 years working on this issue. So if we can give a round of applause for the video.
Good evening, welcome everybody. I want to apologize for the late start. I know there was some traffic accidents and people were having a difficulty getting here, so we wanted to give people a few minutes to get here. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. As Patty has mentioned, this is not a project that you will see a video for the next 20 minutes. This actually took a lot more work and preparation and a lot more courage from the people who you will be seeing in the video to really come out at a very difficult time. This started right when Prop 8 was a very challenging issue here for us in LA. At the onset of this, much of the involvement of the City of LA Human Relations Commission was to look at or work with the protesters, the police, trying to create points of communications between the two. But we really, after this, looking at all of these, the protests and the counter-protests and the ugly language that was being spewed out on the streets, for us, it really meant that there is a need for much deeper work to happen. And this is when we really began internally to look at how do we really work in a way that we can bring people together, which is within the scope of our mandate. And it was right around then that we partnered with the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy, as they were also trying to do similar kind of work. The idea of bringing the group together took a lot of thinking and a lot of looking at the details of it. How do we bring a group of faith leaders who are on opposing sides of the issue together to talk about this very difficult topic? So we really began to look at the model, and what you will see today is a product, as Patty mentioned earlier, 2 years worth of work. We looked at the complexity of the issue. Essentially what you will see in the video isn't necessarily, this isn't as simple as you're either with or against. This has multiple layers of complexity. There's the individual complexity, the internal complexity of it, versus the institutional complexity, versus the societal. So you'll see these various dimensions play out. In creating the dialogue, we took all of that into consideration. We initially began with very informal lunches, gatherings, 2, 3, 4, and then expanded the group into the full dialogue. The initial conversations did not bring at all the issue of same-sex marriage. The initial conversation was getting to know one another on a basic human level. We talked about the day-to-day stuff, things you would talk to your friends about. Began to develop those relationships. And it's through that that we were then able to come in a full day of dialogue. And it wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy. It was very difficult. Emotions were very high. There were moments where there were tears. Voices were raised. But it was all done in a space where people knew and understood that there was a certain level of respect and there was a certain level of civility that we as a society can achieve. And so this was really the vision for the dialogue. It's not so much that we're going to convert the other to our own point of view, our own beliefs. It's rather knowing our own beliefs, respecting our own beliefs, and also seeing the others' right to have their own beliefs and respecting their beliefs. This is what the way of openness is about. So I don't want to take too much time, because I do want you to see the video. Following the initial dialogue, right after Prop 8 in 2010, we brought back the group together. Unfortunately, we lost two of the original members of the dialogue. One had left the country, and one was unable to return to the dialogue. But most of the people you will see in the video were there shortly after Prop 8. And this is really when the idea of filming the dialogue came together, and it really wasn't easy. I do want to highlight that the speakers in the video are speaking as individuals, and they're not representing their own institutions or churches or organizations. They're speaking from the heart. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Way of Openness, and then we will follow with our panelists, and hopefully we're really looking forward to all of you being engaged and a part of this dialogue.
Oftentimes, as a society, we are caught in intense and highly emotional differences. At times, they are framed as clash of values, which suggest that the outcome is a zero-sum in which only one side can exist and be accepted. This is exactly how the issue of same-sex marriage is being framed. As protesters for both sides took to the streets and courtrooms, the fabric of trust and civility that allows our society to thrive was being shredded before our eyes.
The really hard thing about this period of time was that I had
that we use is called the Way of Openness. It's based on disclosure of your deepest motives as well as your deepest beliefs. We have found when we bring together face-to-face religious rivals who might see each other as enemies or suspicious opponents at best, when they engage and find that the other person's motive is indeed one that includes the best interest of the other party, everything changes. They begin to put their wall of suspicion down and start to talk in a real fashion about what matters most to them.
What happened in these dialogues, and you really didn't see you can tell that there's the emotions that were coming through some of the conversations. But this really is meant to be a tool for us to be able to have these conversations. And so, with us this evening are the participants who you just saw on the video, with the exception of Father Alexei Smith, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us this evening. But he was definitely someone that participated in both dialogues and was truly one of the people that touched the rest of the participants in the dialogue. Without any further ado, the idea for us here this evening is to be able to engage with the participants that you just saw in the video. And I'd like to introduce them. I'm not going to read their bios, they are in the program. They all have very impressive bios. So please take the moment to read them. I'd like to first start by introducing Rabbi Sarah Bassin, a Reformed Jewish movement. Rabbi Bassin is also the executive director of New Ground Muslim Jewish Dialogue. Our next panelist is Dr. Ryan Bell, pastor of Hollywood Adventist Church, the senior pastor of the Hollywood Seventh-day Adventist Church. Judy Gilliland, who is the director of Interfaith Relations of the Southern California Public Affairs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Reverend Najuma Smith-Pollard, pastor of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Reverend Dr. Neil Thomas, senior pastor, Founders Metropolitan Community Church, Panelists. Okay. Welcome to see you. So I'm going to turn it this way because I do want to see you. Hi. I hate being at the podium. I really wanted to be with them at the table. We just couldn't finesse it that way, so I apologize. I wanted to kind of go back a little bit because most of you around the table, and as you mentioned in the film, when you came into this dialogue, it was during very intense, high emotions, very difficult time. Neil, I think you and Ryan, Najuma, the three of you were there. If we could start with you, Neil, to kind of tell us your initial reaction once you got the call and the invite to be a part of this dialogue. What was sort of your initial kind of response to that?
Well, some of it would be too much to say in polite company. But the reality was that pretty shocked and humbled to be invited to that table to have that conversation, even though, of course, it's part of the DNA that is embedded in me. My biggest fear, however, was that, and so not in my bios, I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so I'm a former Mormon, although I'm still actually currently a Mormon because I've never been excommunicated. And so I'm still a baptized member of the Mormon Church. So it was actually with some kind of fear and trepidation that I would actually step back into a room amongst folks who had excluded me and my family for one reason or another along my own journey of faith. And so I had to do some internal work first before I was able to be truly present in the dialogue, and that was to do some own self-healing in order for me to be truly present. So in some ways it was another healing moment for me in my journey, and but completely humbled and grateful to be at that conversation, and certainly the outcomes of it.
Najuma and Ryan, is there anything you want to add as far as the initial?
I think, well, my initial, I was a little hesitant initially, only because not too much longer before did our church put out a very strong statement about how we as pastors were to handle same-sex marriage and handle it in our congregations. And so I was a little hesitant only because, you know, we just had, the bishop was very strong, and then we had some pastors that had some very strong feelings and opinions. But I was grateful and open, and now even more grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, as I mentioned on the video, a group of about 6 of us in the Adventist church started a small website kind of effort with a petition and so forth called Adventist Against Prop 8. And so I was not an activist in the LGBT kind of issue base before Proposition 8 became such a controversial issue, and we really felt, the group of us that did that, really strongly about it, and that's what really launched me into this whole thing. So I had already been through a bit of a storm myself internally within my own church system, and so this seemed almost easy by comparison. I knew Neil already, and I knew several of the people that were already, that were going to be a part of it, and I was like Neil, just humbled to be asked. Like, there were probably hundreds of other pastors that could have been invited to do that, so I mean, it didn't have to be me, but it was just a privilege to be able to be a part of it.
And it sounds, and I know that some of it also kind of came out in the dialogues, that even though you wanted to be a part of it, there were still some preservations, and I think on some level, and Najuma and Ryan, I think you shared that more intimately, is there's also this hesitation of backlash from within your own congregations and within your own groups, and so that kind of made it, even more difficult, but yet you still chose to want to be a part of the conversation rather than...
To the Latter-day Saint, gay people, who the pain they suffer, and all the snide comments that are made off the cuff and things like that, that they are aware that they're causing pain of good people. And and to know that side of it, and also know that Neil shared with Judy that when there was the march on our temple by the crowds, he with another person stood out by the gates and said, wait a minute, this isn't us. We shouldn't be doing stuff like this. That was a courageous stand to face off his own community, and I share that with people within our community. And of course the embrace by the wonderful pastor. I've also talked with him in the Long Beach community, and to let our people know that there's compassion on the other side, not just the hate accusations and stuff like that. I think that's the beginning. We started these small steps because it's going to be a long time before we can chisel at the granite that's on the other side.
There is the whole separation of church and state. But I think for me, as people of faith, I think it's despicable that we argue about dogma and dogmatic principles when there are people living on the streets homeless here in Los Angeles, when there are people who are fighting to keep hold of their homes, when there are people in every community who are struggling financially. And the main principles of the peoples of faith, whether we're synagogues, churches, temples, is to be alongside people and to offer hope. And all we can talk about is whether two people of the same gender can get married or not. And to me, that is an absolute despicable indictment. And quite honestly, I think it's an excuse of religious peoples not to get on with the work that they really fundamentally believe in. And that is the ways of peace and love and hope and charity. And if we can get over our cheap little selves and our own dogma to really live out the values of what we preach, perhaps people will start believing in God again.
The value of my voice. And so what this conversation has done for me is to, and I'm going to use still Ryan's word, help me to have the courage to use my voice and the platforms that God has opened up doors for me to have, whether it's the radio, the pulpit, even where I work at USC and in constant communication with faith leaders, but to use my voice to share with those who think differently that there is another way to think, and let's open our minds just a little. I don't know if I doubt I'm going to change my denomination anytime soon, but I'm going to do my best.
We're all on this path of life. Our experiences have been different before and now. The environments that we grew up in are all different, and we all have our own stories to tell. And I hope that I can now encourage others to tell their stories and help to build accepting environments where those stories can actually be heard and the pain expressed and feel loving arms around them to help heal. And as we start with one or two, and they do one or two, and we each do a few more, hopefully we can have that heaven on earth that we all seek, and this whole world will be filled with love. Thank you.
I think what this dialogue really demonstrated for me was a paradigm shift from rhetoric to story. And I think that's the only way that we're going to start to make inroads in building a society that embraces us all, and a society that doesn't turn to violence during moments of tension, regardless of what the issue of disagreement is. And I think that's the real power of dialogue, is to move us out of slogans and rhetoric and into the place of personal narrative and story and listening and hearing.
Word listening as my sort of last word, I think, that we can never go wrong by listening more. And we too are having a Lenten series, which is wrapping up this week at our church, and it's called 5 Deadly Sins of the Church. And we began with patriarchy and heterosexism. We moved on to militarism and nationalism and racism, and it's been heavy. Especially for a white dude like me, it's been really heavy. It's, it's like so my thing is, like, the more of those boxes of privilege that you tick off, the more listening to speaking ratio you need to do. So, like, you just make a list of privileges, which what we did in our first series, and it was a little embarrassing for some of us who have all the privileges and have had for centuries, right? Still doing all the talking. And I think for me, it's been humbling to come to terms with my privilege and the need that I have to listen to other stories. And I think that that's been a theme for me and will continue to be. Easter's coming.
You, to our audience, with another challenge. To say that what we provided here is simply a tool for you to take. And we challenge you that you utilize these tools, whether it's the video, whether it's the speakers you met here tonight, that you can expand those conversations within your own circles, with your own people. The idea is that we're not talking to one another. I mean, the people around the table, and it was purposely done in a way that we brought people who were on complete sides of the issue. Because we can easy to have those conversations with people who agree with us, but it's very difficult to have those conversations with people who disagree with us. One of the things that I also want to highlight, something that Judy mentioned earlier, is that one of the outcomes of this dialogue and building those relationships is that the group want to take on action items to bring together their congregation, whether it's doing a day of service collectively with their own congregations, and expanding those conversations within their own congregations. So it is a process of development and growth, just like anything else we've gone through. With the Supreme Court decision coming down, and we talked about this evening, our hope is that we are cultivating our communities to have this conversation beyond. And it's not just about what the decision is going to be, it's how do we heal as a society, as a community, and how do we grow together as a society, as a community. With that, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for being here for the 2 years that you've been with us. I want to thank all of you here tonight because I know it wasn't easy to fight traffic coming all the way to Hollywood and being away from your families and your homes. So I want to thank you for being here tonight. And I do hope that you're able to take something with you. Thanks again.
BeyondProfLA.com. You can tell them. Beyond Prof 8 LA. You should tell them.
Okay, we got a new